Have you ever had a woman open up to you about her problems? You listened, you cared, you even tried to help, and somehow she pulled away afterward. No fight, no explanation, just distance. Most men think that moment was neutral or worse, annoying. They tell themselves she was just venting. But that belief is exactly why attraction dies quietly. Because when a woman shares her problems, you're not being asked to fix anything. You're being evaluated. And most men fail without ever knowing they were tested. They say the wrong things, hold the wrong energy, and turn what could have deepened attraction into the beginning of emotional shutdown. In this video, I'm not going to teach you how to comfort a woman. I'm going to show you what she's actually measuring in that moment and why understanding it separates the men women choose from the men they slowly walk away from. Most men hear a woman talk about her problems and immediately label it as venting. Just noise, just emotions spilling out, something to tolerate until it passes. And that single assumption is where everything starts going wrong. Because when you reduce that moment to she's just venting, you mentally downgrade it. You half listen. You wait for your turn to the big mistake, treating it as just venting, speak, or worse, you start thinking about how to shut it down politely. You don't realize you're standing at a psychological crossroads, and the direction you take determines whether attraction grows or quietly dies. Here's why this misread happens so often. Men are wired around problem solving. When something is wrong, the instinct is to fix it, optimize it, or remove it. That mindset works in business, work, and logistics. But relationships don't operate on efficiency. They operate on emotional meaning. And when a man applies a logic-first lens to an emotional moment, he ends up missing the point entirely. Another layer to this is how men bond. Male bonding is activity-based. You do things together, you talk sideways. Emotions are often secondary. So when a woman starts opening up, the male brain tries to categorize it quickly. Is this something I need to solve, ignore, or manage? Rarely does it ask the more important question, why is she bringing this to me? Because women don't open up emotionally at random. They don't just dump their inner world on whoever happens to be nearby. Emotional sharing is selective. It costs energy. It requires vulnerability. And people don't spend that currency carelessly. If she didn't care, she wouldn't bother bringing you into it. That's the part most men miss. The act of sharing isn't neutral, it's intentional. It means she sees you as someone relevant enough to witness her internal state. Whether that relevance turns into attraction or fades into emotional background noise depends entirely on how you treat that moment. Imagine two men hearing the same story from the same woman. She talks about feeling overlooked at work, unappreciated, drained. One man treats it like background chatter. He nods, throws out a quick response, maybe changes the subject. The other stays present. He doesn't rush. He doesn't minimize it. He doesn't try to escape the discomfort of the moment. Same words from her, two completely different outcomes. One becomes forgettable. The other becomes significant. The moment you treat her sharing as noise, you disqualify yourself. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, internally. In a way, you'll only feel later when she starts pulling back, and you can't quite explain why. This isn't about being emotional. It's about understanding what the moment actually is. And until you male versus female wiring in emotional moments get that right, every move you make afterward is built on the wrong foundation. There's a dangerous myth men believe about women and emotions, that women are emotional with everyone, that if she's expressive, she must be that way all the time with anyone who's around. And that assumption quietly robs men of leverage they don't even realize they had. Yes, women are emotional, but they are also highly selective. Emotional access is not public property. It's gated. And the gatekeeper is her nervous system, her sense of safety, and her instinct for discernment. She decides consciously or not who gets to see behind the curtain and who stays on the surface. That's the difference most men fail to recognize. There's small talk and then there's emotional disclosure. Small talk is cheap. It's laughter, casual flirting, light stories. Emotional disclosure is expensive. It involves fear, insecurity, frustration, doubt, the parts of her that aren't polished or impressive. She'll laugh with many people. She'll tell stories, joke, and keep things light in plenty of rooms. But she only brings her real concerns, her internal tension, and her vulnerabilities to a few. And when she does, it's never accidental. That's emotional gatekeeping. When she talks about her problems, she's not just talking, she's choosing. She's deciding who gets to stand closer to her internal world and who stays emotionally irrelevant. That choice is based on how safe, grounded, and steady she perceives you to be. This is why two men can know the same woman and have completely different experiences with her. One gets surface emotional sharing is selective. She's choosing you level energy. The other gets depth. Not because he asked for it, but because she allowed it. Vulnerability is an investment, and people don't invest where they don't see value. From a psychological perspective, opening up costs her something. It exposes her. It removes control. It creates the possibility of being dismissed, misunderstood, or minimized. So, when she does it, she's already made a judgment call about you. She believes, at least on some level, that you might be able to handle it. That's why treating her sharing casually is such a mistake. When you act like it's nothing, you send a message back to her nervous system. Your risk wasn't worth it. And once that signal is received, the gate doesn't just stay closed, it locks. She's not dumping emotions, she's allocating trust. And the men who understand that don't rush the moment. They don't try to upgrade it or escape it. They recognize it for what it is. A quiet invitation not to talk more, but to show through presence that she chose correctly. When a woman tells you her problems, something important is happening beneath the surface, and most men never see it. They think they're just listening. They think they're being supportive, but in reality, they're being measured. Not in a manipulative way, not as a game, and not as some conscious checklist she's running through in her head. It's quieter than that, more instinctive. When she opens up, there's an unspoken question sitting in the room. Can this man stay solid when I'm not? That's the test. She's not testing your intelligence. She's not testing your solutions. She's not even testing your empathy in the way most men think. She's testing your emotional stability, your ability to remain grounded while she temporarily isn't. From an evolutionary and psychological standpoint, this makes sense. Emotional volatility is information. When she shares it, she's observing what happens to you. Do you tense up? Do you rush to control the situation? Do you become defensive, uncomfortable, or overwhelmed? Or do you remain centered, calm, and present? Most men fail here in predictable ways. Some get defensive. They hear her frustration and take it personally. They explain, justify, or subtly argue with her feelings. The message that lands is simple. Her emotions are a problem. Others overfix. They jump into action mode immediately, throwing solutions at her like a shield. On the surface, it looks helpful, but underneath it communicates impatience, an inability to sit with discomfort. And then there are the men who get emotionally shaken. Her stress becomes their stress. Her chaos bleeds into them. They lose their frame trying to prove how much they care. None of these, the hidden psychological test, can you stay grounded? Reactions feel safe to her nervous system. Now, picture a different response. She's upset. Her thoughts are scattered. Her emotions are loud. And you don't mirror it. You don't flinch. You don't escalate or retreat. You stay steady. You listen without urgency. Your tone doesn't change. Your presence doesn't collapse. That's the moment attraction either strengthens or fades. Because she's not watching what you say. She's watching who you become in that moment. Your words matter far less than your regulation, far less than your ability to hold your own emotional center while she's expressing hers. When she senses that you're not destabilized by her internal state, something clicks. She registers you as stable, as reliable, as someone who can handle reality when it gets uncomfortable. And that instinctive recognition is powerful. This is why two men can respond kindly and still get different outcomes. One becomes the man she respects. The other becomes the man she feels emotionally alone with, even while talking. The test isn't announced. There's no second chance notification. It happens in real time. And you pass it or fail it long before you realize you were ever being tested at all. This is where a lot of good men lose women without ever understanding what they did wrong. They listen, they care, they lean in, And the moment she finishes explaining what's bothering her, they go straight into fix mode. Advice, strategies, solutions. Step 1, step 2, step 3. From the outside, it looks like effort, like competence, like leadership, but emotionally, it lands completely wrong. Here's the trap. Fixing feels right to men because it's how we show care. When someone we value is hurting, the instinct is to remove the pain, to make it stop, to solve it. And on paper, that sounds masculine and responsible. In reality, it often does the opposite of what you intend. When you rush to fix, she doesn't feel helped. She feels unheard, not because your advice is bad, but because it bypasses her emotional state. It skips the part where she wants to be seen inside the experience she's having. Instead of feeling understood, she feels corrected. Instead of feeling supported, she feels managed. And the nervous system reads that as distance. Think about what's happening internally for her in that moment. She's already carrying frustration, doubt, or overwhelm. When you immediately move into solutions, it can feel like your common ways men fail, defensive, overfixing, absorbing, saying, "This shouldn't be affecting you this much." Even if that's not what you mean, that's what lands. The result is subtle, but powerful. She stops going deeper. She gives you less. Not because she doesn't like you, but because she doesn't feel met where she is. You see this play out constantly. She talks about a difficult boss. You tell her how to handle it. She talks about feeling disconnected from friends. You suggest cutting them off or finding new ones. Logical responses, clean answers, and each time she emotionally steps back just a little because she wasn't asking you to build a plan. She was asking you to stay present with her reality. The more you fix, the more she closes. That's the part most men don't want to accept. Your competence isn't the problem. Your timing is when you prioritize solutions over presence. You unintentionally communicate that her emotions are something to get past rather than something you can sit with. And here's the hard truth. You don't fail because you don't care. You fail because you care the wrong way. Attraction doesn't grow from efficiency. It grows from emotional attunement, from knowing when to act and when to simply hold space. The men who understand this don't rush to prove their value. They let it show through restraint. And that restraint is exactly what separates a man she leans into from a man she slowly pulls away from. If fixing isn't what she's looking for, then what is? This is where most conversations about male-female dynamics get vague. They say things like, just listen, or be supportive, without ever explaining what that actually means in practice. And without clarity, men either overdo it or shut down completely. What she's looking for is emotional containment. That doesn't mean agreement, it doesn't mean submission. And it definitely doesn't mean absorbing her emotions as your own. Emotional containment means your presence creates stability instead of adding movement. It means her emotions can exist without you trying to control them, escape them, or amplify them. When a woman is upset, her nervous system is activated. Thoughts are racing. Emotions are layered. She's not looking for logic in that moment. She's looking for regulation. And regulation doesn't come from answers. It comes from contrast. Your calm becomes the counter-we. This is why a single grounded response can do more than 10 well-structured solutions. A simple acknowledgement delivered with steadiness lands deeper. Why rushing to fix kills attraction than advice delivered with urgency. Not because the words are magic, but because your state is. Containment works because it signals safety. It tells her nervous system, I can feel this and not lose control. That's what allows her to settle, not being told what to do, not being talked out of her feelings, being met without pressure. There's an important distinction here. Containment is not validating every thought she has. You're not agreeing that her boss is terrible or that her friends are awful. You're validating the experience of feeling overwhelmed, hurt, or frustrated. Those are not the same thing. This is where many men get confused. They think if they don't offer solutions or opinions, they're being passive. In reality, they're being precise. They're choosing the response that actually serves the moment instead of their own discomfort with it. Picture this. She says she feels drained, unappreciated, and stuck. You don't rush in, you don't interrupt, you let her finish, and then you respond calmly without theatrics. You acknowledge the weight of what she's carrying. You stay present. You don't change the subject. You don't try to make it better immediately. And something shifts. Her breathing slows. Her energy changes. Not because the problem disappeared, but because you didn't become part of the chaos around it. She doesn't calm down because you fix the problem. She calms down because you don't become part of it. That's the power of emotional containment. It doesn't solve her life. It stabilizes the moment. And in relationships, that ability matters far more than having the right answer. This is where a lot of men quietly burn themselves out without realizing why. They hear that they're supposed to be supportive. They hear that women want understanding, presence, and empathy. And somewhere along the way, they confuse support with self-sacrifice. They start carrying emotions that were never meant to be theirs. There's a critical difference between grounding her and carrying her. And strong men know exactly where that line is. Grounding means you stay present without absorbing. Carrying means you internalize her emotions. Take responsibility for fixing them and let them destabilize your own center. One creates attraction. The other slowly erodes it. When a man carries her emotions, he drains himself. He replays her problems in his head. He feels pressure to make everything better. He starts measuring his worth by whether she feels okay. Over time, that creates resentment, fatigue, and emotional collapse. And none of that feels safe or attractive to her. From her perspective, a man who gets pulled under by her emotions doesn't feel strong. He feels fragile, not because he cares, but because he loses himself in the process. And women don't respect men. They feel what she really wants. Emotional containment. They have to emotionally manage. This is the part many men resist hearing. Being deeply affected by her emotions doesn't make you more connected. It makes you less grounded. And grounding is what she's responding to. Presence without absorption is the boundary. You can listen without carrying. You can empathize without drowning. You can care without collapsing your frame. That's what emotional strength actually looks like in practice. There are moments where listening is exactly what's required, where she needs space to express herself without interruption or direction. And there are moments where your steadiness, your calm, and your refusal to spiral with her is what regulates the interaction. Knowing the difference is what separates a man she leans on from a man she eventually avoids emotionally. Picture two responses to the same situation. In one, she's upset and anxious, and you mirror it. You escalate with her. You try to fix everything immediately. In the other, you remain slow, composed, and attentive. You don't rush. You don't panic. You let her emotions move while you stay anchored. Only one of those responses creates safety. She doesn't want someone to sink with her. She wants something solid to stand on. That doesn't mean you become distant or cold. It means you stay rooted in yourself while being present with her. You don't abandon your emotional center to prove you care. You demonstrate it by keeping your balance. And that balance is what makes her trust you more, not less. Because the man who can stay steady without shutting down is the man she feels safest opening up to again. This is how most men lose women. Not through a fight, not through betrayal, not through some dramatic turning point they can point to afterward. They lose them quietly. At first, nothing seems wrong. She still talks to you. She still shows up. But something subtle shifts. She shares less. She keeps things lighter. The deeper conversations slowly disappear, replaced by surface level exchanges that feel polite but hollow. Most men don't notice this phase until it's too late. When a woman stops sharing her inner world, it's not because she suddenly became private. It's because she learned through experience that opening up doesn't lead to connection. It leads to distance. So she adapts. She protects herself. And grounding versus carrying her emotions attraction begins to fade in silence. This is where the friend zone is actually formed. But when she realizes she feels emotionally alone even while talking to you, she shared, "You misread it. You fixed, minimized, absorbed, or destabilized." And her nervous system took note. Over time, she stops bringing you her problems, not because they disappeared, but because you're no longer the place she takes them. Emotional shutdown follows, And once that door closes, it rarely reopens. This is why breakups often feel sudden to men. From their perspective, things were fine. From hers, the connection had been dying slowly for months. Contrast that with the man who stays anchored. He doesn't become her emotional sponge, absorbing everything until he collapses. And he doesn't push her away with detachment or impatience. He remains steady, present, unshaken. His emotional center doesn't move just because hers does. That's the difference between being an anchor and being a sponge. A sponge absorbs until it's saturated and useless. An anchor holds firm regardless of the conditions around it. Women feel that difference instinctively. One creates trust, the other creates quiet doubt. Women don't leave when they feel too much. They leave when they feel alone while opening up. And the men who understand this don't need to chase, convince, or overperform. They don't lose women in silence because they never taught them that silence was safer than being seen. They become the place where emotions can land without causing collapse. And that's not just attractive, that's unforgettable. When a woman tells you her problems, it's never how men lose women. Quietly, emotional shutdown just about the problems. It's a moment of selection. She's not asking you to fix her life. She's not handing you a burden. She's opening a door and watching what kind of man stands on the other side of it. Whether you rush, collapse, or stay steady, tells her everything she needs to know. If you misunderstand that moment, the loss is quiet. She doesn't argue. She doesn't explain. She simply stops bringing you into her inner world. Attraction fades. Not because you did something terrible, but because you failed to meet the moment that mattered. But when you understand what's actually happening, everything changes. You don't fix. You don't run. You don't fall apart trying to prove you care. You stay grounded. You become the man who can listen without being shaken. The man who can sit with emotion without needing to control it. The man whose presence stabilizes instead of escalates. And that's not weakness. That's emotional strength in its most disciplined form. Because the truth is, she won't remember every word you said. She won't replay your advice line by line. What stays with her is how safe she felt saying the hard things out loud, how steady you were when she wasn't, how you didn't disappear, panic, or turn her vulnerability into a problem to solve. That's the man women don't forget. That's the man they trust. That's the becoming the man she trusts and chooses man they choose. If this video gave you clarity you didn't have before, subscribe. This channel is for men who want to understand women at a deeper level, not guess and hope it works out. If this insight hit close to home, like it and share it with someone who's losing women without knowing why, and leave a comment. Have you ever failed this test without realizing it at the time? Because awareness is where strength begins. And staying grounded is what separates the men women respect from the men they slowly walk away.